Hey everybody, Kevin P. McAuliffe here, and I am back again with another Digital Juice tutorial, and this time we're going to take a look at getting started with Digital Juice's animated canvases. Now, as I start out all of my getting started with tutorials, I've got to remind you that if you haven't downloaded the most recent version of the juicer, you need to head on over to the Digital Juice website and download it. Now, before I do that, I need to point out that updating the juicer by simply coming into the juicer and saying help juicer 3 updates is not the same as downloading the most recent version. As you can see, if I hide the juicer and command tab into Firefox, the most recent version of the juicer that was released on October 22nd is Juicer 3.85 Build 131, an absolute free download for Windows and for all versions of Mac. So if you don't have the most recent version of the juicer, I want you to head on over to the juicer section of the Digital Juice website and download it. Now, I have gotten a couple of emails from people asking me why I always go through this every time I do a getting started with tutorial. Well, what's important to keep in mind is that I know a lot of seasoned veterans are always on DJTV watching the getting started with tutorials, but what I want you to keep in mind is that in many cases we have a lot of new users to Digital Juice that come in and check out these tutorials. So I want to make sure that they don't miss a single thing when we're doing our getting started with tutorials, which includes obviously downloading the most recent version of the juicer. Okay, so obviously once you've received your product and you've downloaded the juicer, you're ready to install. Now, one thing that I do want to remind you of is that in many cases, in the excitement of ripping open the box and pulling out that fantastic looking Digital Juice product from the box, you may have lost the product number. Well, don't worry. Anytime you make a purchase from Digital Juice, if you happen to lose that activation key, don't worry. What you can do is you can simply navigate up to your account. And once you're in the Your Account section, you can simply navigate over here to Activation Keys, and from here you have access to all of the activation keys for all of the products you've purchased through the Digital Juice store. Something obviously very important to keep in mind. It's actually a great way to stay organized. Then you don't need to worry about keeping all those pieces of paper. You can simply navigate to the Digital Juice website to the Activation Keys section inside of your account. Okay, so let's hide out of Firefox and let's get into the juicer and take a look at this great new product. Now, you're going to notice that once you have the newest version of the juicer installed, that there is going to be a new section over here titled, appropriately enough, Animated Canvases. Now, in this case, I already have Animated Canvases Collection 1 installed, but if you haven't installed the product yet, if you try to drop it down, you're not actually going to see anything in there. So let's go through the installation process. So I'm just going to twirl up my Animated Canvases. I'm going to navigate up to File, and I'm going to come down to Install Products. The juicer is obviously going to recognize that I have the Animated Canvases Disk 1 inside of my drive, so I'm simply going to say Install. The next thing that's going to ask me for is my email address. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that you're going to want to enter the email address that's obviously associated with your Digital Juice account and your activation key. So I'm simply going to enter the activation key and I'm going to say activate. I'm now going to be asked to read through the license agreement. Obviously read through that, it's very important, and simply say I agree if you agree with it. Then you're going to say continue. Now, obviously in this case, it's telling me that Animated Canvases Collection 1 is already installed. Do I want to reinstall? In this case, I'm not going to reinstall. But basically, if this was a clean install, I would then get all of the previews installed into the juicer. I'm simply going to say cancel. And what you'll now notice is over here underneath Animated Canvases, you can see it pop up right away. I now have all of the previews for Animated Canvases Collection 1. Now, here's an interesting situation I ran into. This is a clean install of Lion, and this was the first time that I had installed the juicer. And this is how the juicer had come up and displayed things for me, which is obviously very handy. But it's not how I'm accustomed to working. It's actually great because I can simply come up and select one of the previews, and as soon as I click on it, you'll see it start to preview. But I'm accustomed to having that big window up at the top, and I had to think to myself for a second, well, how do I get that window back? And here's a great little shortcut for you. What you're going to do is you're going to navigate over here to the drop-down, and you can see that in the drop-down I have 3 options. I have Play in Place, which is selected right now. I have Detailed View, and if I click on it, you're going to recognize this from your Music Box Volumes 1 and 2 installation. This is how the layout is for you to go through and pick music. Or how I'm accustomed to working is in Thumbnail View. Once you select Thumbnail View, now you can obviously come in, you can click on one of the previews, and you're going to see it played for you up here on the top, and you can easily come up and start it and stop it however you like. Now, before we go into actually exporting the file from the juicer, I do want to point out that you do have access to both the HD elements, and if I scroll down here, you're going to see that we have access to SD elements as well. Okay, so let's talk about exporting an element from the juicer. So I'm going to choose Alien Beam HD. Couple ways that we can export it. First, we can take the file and simply drag it right over here into the batch panel. Or, obviously a quicker way is to simply right click on the element and say Add Item or Items to Batch. What I'm going to do now is with that item selected over here in the batch panel, I'm simply going to click on settings. You're going to see now I'm brought to the settings window, and now you can go through and tailor this clip exactly the way that you need it. Now, I happen to have a preset in here for how I like to work, and you'll see that if I come up here and I drop down my presets, you'll see that I have one called 1080-2398 PSF. I'm going to click on it. Once I click on it, it's going to make sure that my canvas is 1920 by 1080 and the frame rate is 23,976 frames per second. You're also going to see that the duration of the clip is 37 seconds and 16 frames. There's obviously no cross dissolve and the speed is normal. I can drop that down. You'll see that I can have very slow, slow, normal, fast, or very fast. Now also, I don't have any transformations happening. I haven't adjusted the scale or the position or the rotation. And probably most importantly in your export process is down here in the output section. This is where you're going to get in and you're going to set things like render the alpha separately. Do you want a field order? In this case, because I'm working in progressive, I'm not going to want a field order. But if you're working in 1080i, you're going to want to make sure that you select upper field dominance. If you're working in standard definition, I'm speaking in NTSC right now, you're going to want to make sure that you select lower field dominance for standard definition. But like I said, in this case, because I'm working in 1080p, I'm simply going to select none. The format option I have is QuickTime, and you'll see that if I click on the little wrench icon, I'm going to be brought to my compression settings. And in this case, I have it set to Apple ProRes 422. But you can obviously get in and set whatever codec you want. If you happen to be working with Media Composer, you have access to the Avid DNX codecs. If you're going to be working in, DVC Pro HD, you can get in and set this up however you like. But I'm going to be working in ProRes 422. And in this case, I'm not going to select interlace. But if you'd selected a field order over here, you're going to want to make sure you select interlaced and select the field dominance that matches what you had selected over in the output section. But like I said, because I'm not interlaced, I'm just going to leave that as unchecked. I'm just going to say cancel. Last but probably most important, you're going to want to select where you're outputting this file to. And last but certainly not least, obviously you might want to give this file a unique name instead of just Alien Beam HD. But for what I'm doing, Alien Beam HD is fine. Now in most cases, this is where I would wrap up my getting started with tutorial, but I thought we'd do something interesting. Let's create a very simple and basic effect with our animated canvas, and let's see how many applications we can do it in. I'm just going to hide out of the juicer, and let's start with Adobe's After Effects. Okay, so let's Command Tab into Adobe's After Effects. Now I'm using After Effects CS 5.5, but this trick will probably work all the way back to version 3 of After Effects. Assuming your After Effects has transfer modes, then this trick is going to work. What I'm going to do first of all is press Command and I on the Mac, Control and I on Windows to import my Alien Beam HD clip. I'm simply going to say Open. I'm going to create a new composition with this clip by simply grabbing it, dragging it down, and letting it go on the Create New Composition button. And now let's create some text. I'm just going to type in, appropriately enough, digital juice. And all I'm going to do is just center this up here. And what we're going to do is we're going to use probably my favorite transfer mode, and that is overlay. And basically what's going to happen is that when I switch over to overlay, you're going to see that through the lighter parts of the image, you're going to start to see a very cool cutout of digital juice. But the darker the background gets, you can see digital juice starts to disappear. So as I preview this, basically digital juice is going to almost appear and disappear in the lightness and in the darkness, almost like a light is being shone on it. Very simple, yet very effective effect to do. Very simple in After Effects, but let's see how simple this effect is to do inside of, let's say, Final Cut Pro X. So I'm going to hide out of Adobe's After Effects and let's Command Tab into Final Cut Pro X. Import a file, and obviously we're going to import our Alien Beam HD from the desktop. I'll just add it to the existing event. I'm simply going to say import. And once I have the clip in my event, we're just going to make sure that the entire clip is selected, which it is. I'm just going to grab it, drag it right down here into my timeline. And let's just add a title that's included inside of Final Cut Pro X onto my clip. So I'll just use the build in and build out, and I'll just use the simple fade. I'm just going to drag it over here. We're going to attach it to our clip, and I'm just going to grab the end of it and just drag it right down. I'm just going to park my time bar right in the middle of that clip. And let's add a transfer mode to this title. I'm simply going to select the title. I'm going to navigate over to the inspector, and once the inspector opens up, you're going to notice right away that we're in the video section, and you're going to see right here under compositing, the blend mode is set to normal. Well, we can easily take normal and switch it to overlay, and as soon as we do, you'll see things change. And now, if we get to the point where things are going to go dark, you'll see there is the same very cool effect that we created inside of After Effects, easily created inside of Final Cut Pro X. Okay. So how about I show you how to do the same thing inside of Apple's Motion. I'm just going to hide Final Cut Pro X and let's Command Tab into Motion 5. Now obviously Motion 5, but the technique works exactly the same inside of Motion 4. Let's select our Alien Beam HD. I'm going to grab it over here, drag it into our group. I'm just going to zoom back here. There we go. Perfect. Let's select our text tool. I'm just going to type in, appropriately enough again, Digital Juice. And let's just come over to our inspector. We'll center this up and increase the size of the text a bit. So let's center it. There we go. Just increase the size. And we can even adjust the line spacing a little bit. That's looking good. And let's just position this properly here. We'll just come back to our arrow tool, position it right dead in the middle of the screen. I have my dynamic guides on, looking very nice. Now we obviously want to take this element and we want to add a transfer mode to it. No problem. I'm simply going to right click on my digital juice word mark. I'm going to navigate down to blend mode and there we go. There's overlay. Look at that. Exactly as we had it in After Effects, exactly as we had it in Final Cut Pro X. Now exactly the same inside of Apple's Motion 4 and Apple's Motion 5. Okay, so let me just hide out of Motion. So let's see if we can do the same trick in Final Cut Pro 7. So let's tab into Final Cut Pro 7. Obviously we want to import our Alien Beam HD clip. And let's create a new sequence. There we go. We'll just double click on it. I'm going to grab Alien Beam HD, drag it down into my sequence. It's going to remind me that the clip and the sequence don't match each other. So let's just change them to match each other. And we need a title. So let's just come down to our standard text. And we're simply going to type in again, Digital Juice. And let's make sure we're using Impact. There we are, Impact. And let's make sure we'll just bump the size up here, maybe make it 120. And we have it centered, perfect. And we'll just adjust the leading a little bit because I know that the leading is going to be too much. It's even still a little too much there. Let's just bring it down to, yeah, 29 is probably fine. Perfect. I'm simply going to take Digital Juice. I'm going to drag it right down here into my composition. I'm going to drag the end all the way down. Now, can we do the exact same technique inside Final Cut Pro 7? Absolutely. With our clip selected, I'm simply going to navigate up to Modify. Let's come down to Composite Mode, and let's simply select Overlay. And there's the exact same technique now done in Final Cut Pro 7. Okay, I've got one more for you. Let's hide out of Final Cut Pro 7, and let's take a look at Premiere Pro CS 5.5. Command Tab into Premiere Pro CS 5.5. Obviously, the first thing we need is a clip. Command and I on my keyboard. I'm simply going to select Alien Beam HD. I'm going to say Import. And I'm going to take this Alien Beam HD clip. I'm going to drag it right down here into my Create New Item button. You'll see we get a sequence, exact same parameters as Alien Beam HD. And let's create a new title. I'm simply going to create a default still. And let's just leave it as the standard for now because I'm not going to worry too much about frame rates and that type of thing because obviously I'm just showing you a little quick introduction to blending modes. I'm going to say OK. And of course we need to stick with our Digital Juice font. Let's make sure that we center it up. And I'm obviously going to stick with Impact because we've had it the entire way through right now. I think I got an extra space in there, which I do. And let's just increase the size of this title. And we'll just position it right about in the middle. I'm simply going to close the title tool. And let's take this title, drag it right down here into our timeline. Just zoom down a little bit. Just grab the end, drag it all the way down. Now, to do our transfer mode inside of Premiere Pro CS 5.5, very simple. I'm simply going to select the title, which it's already selected. I'm going to navigate right up here into the Effects Control window. I'm going to drop down Opacity, and there's my blend mode. And I'm simply going to set it to Overlay. And there we go. Whether it's After Effects, whether it's Final Cut Pro X, whether it's Motion 5, Final Cut Pro 7, or in this case, Premiere Pro CS 5.5, you'll see no matter what the application is you're using, whether it's nonlinear editing or whether it's compositing, getting started with the animated canvases is very simple, especially if you're going to do an easy technique like using blend modes. So if you have any questions, you have any comments, or you have any tutorial requests, head on over and post them in the Digital Juice forums. This has been Kevin P. McAuliffe. Thanks a lot for watching.